Hello, everybody. My name is Anton Jelep. I'm the PR of Advent Group. And today I would like to greet you with an interesting topic about an executive MBA education in Europe. We're going to talk about what is an EMBA, why do it in Europe, how do MBAs, executive MBAs differ from Europe to the US, and then we're going to go into some interesting topics. I'm joined here today by Sophie Mathieu, Marketing Manager at Kellogg WHU.
Hi everyone, I'm very happy to be here today.
We have Valérie Madon, Director at EMBA at ESCP Europe.
Hello everyone, I'm happy to be part of the group today.
And then we have Kurt Woods, Manager at KEDGE Business Club from KEDGE Business School.
Hello everybody, my name is Kurt, pleasure to be here.
I'm very glad that we have such a strong team here on the show, and I'm going to start right in with the most asked question: what is an executive MBA and how is it different from the classic MBA? Let's start with Sophie.
Yeah, sure. So I would say that an executive MBA is it differs from a regular MBA in terms of the people that that are selected to do an executive MBA. So the executive MBA is specifically geared more towards experienced managers and mid-career professionals. They usually have, on average, at least for our program, between 8 to 10 years of professional experience. And out of that, they have about 3-4 years, I would say, of management experience. So it could be, of course, any sort of management. So it could be project management. We have a lot of people coming from IT or but on average, that's the kind of profile that the executive MBA usually attracts. And I would say also another difference is the structure of the program. So it's basically for our program it's a modular structure. So people are required the candidates are required to keep their full-time employment, and it's actually we have a structure where they come to different modules for long weekends, and then in between those modules they have about 6 weeks of kind of, I would say, breathing time where they can just go back to their work and directly apply the knowledge that they've learned in the workplace.
It's a very applied kind of approach which kind of manages to combine both study time and work time.
Exactly.
Kurt, did you have to add something about this?
I agree with everything that Sophie said. Most definitely our profiles within the executive MBA program are very similar. I'd like to add, though, that the people that I work with are seeking a second professional life. They've already they have accomplished careers, they are very successful in their lives already, but they're looking at change, lasting change. They're looking to take on projects that are much bigger. Many of them are seeking positions in the executive boardroom. Some of them have entrepreneurial ambitions, and they're very, very close to the point where they might transition out of a traditional work world and undertake projects of their own. They're also interested in dealing with colleagues and issues of complexity and influence. And I think that defines the executive MBA very much from a full-time MBA, because they're able to capitalize on the executive experience that they do have. And that the whole program that we offer here at KEDGE is designed to do that, is to work with these very serious professionals to help them to develop. We use coaching, we have executive coaching as part of their program through various study trips, etc. And I think that is very differentiating in the area of an executive MBA.
Valerie, is it a bit different at ESCP, or is it quite the same?
Well, I must say that I agree with my colleagues. We are looking for high potential managers who are seeking for an acceleration of their professional career. So we are, of course, looking for people who have on average 10 years of work experience. and are looking for a change, acceleration in their professional life. Of course, our program is also very modular because it has to be executive friendly. So, of course, it's a part-time program, and we are trying to offer modules in our different campuses, and we offer a very modular structure, and it's very customizable so that anybody who has a very full professional life can follow the courses we offer. If you look at the modules in an executive MBA, it may seem that some of the modules, such as the fundamentals of management, may be more or less the same as the ones taught in a regular full-time MBA. But I think what is very different is the way things are taught in the classroom. We have lots of exchanges between participants. The professor is not only the one talking, and of course, participants take advantage of what they are living in their professional life to give examples and to exchange with the professor and with one another on a specific subject.
Right, this sounds really interesting indeed. So it's not like the classic classroom where you have a lecturer who just, disseminates knowledge and kind of explains concepts to students, but it's more like a forum where, like you said, experienced managers, professionals with 10 to 12 years of experience are able to, bounce ideas off of each other and learn that way. Would you all agree that this is what an EMBA degree is about?
Yeah, that's definitely. Sorry.
I think most definitely that's true. I also see the relationship between the executives within the courses. They're able to relate often with their professors, with the people that are brought in to lead the courses at their level. Whereas in a full-time MBA, there would be a significant difference in the level of experience between the professor teaching the course. Here, with the executives, they all have very, very extensive experience. So they're constantly leveraging each other. So the professor or the intervenant becomes a facilitator far more than a top-down type professor.
Yes, I agree with that, but I think, however, this is Valerie talking. I think, however, in our executive MBA, we have lots of permanent faculty taking part in the program because I think the input brought by the professor is still very important concept, even if, of course, the concepts and the examples on the everyday life will be very important and discussed between participants. But at first, I think the fundamentals of management and general concepts are still being given by the professor.
Understood. Sophie, do you have something to add to this?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I agree completely with Kurt that we often hear professors from either Kellogg or WHU that they are learning so much from teaching the executives just because the executives have a certain position within a certain company, and when the professors are using a lot of case studies, and some of them are from companies that even the executives are coming from, and they're really at the heart of the issue, and they have lived that issue, for example, and they're able to share really with the professors, their point of view or their perspective, being at the heart of this particular case study for a particular company. So I think there's this very rich interaction between the professors and the EMBA students that you really, I think you don't see that with other MBA programs because of the level that the EMBA students have attained within their company and professional lives.
Mm-hmm. I think there's a certain extent of benchmarking that goes on as well among the executives during the program. They want to, there's such diversity in terms of the sectors and functions that the participants are coming from, that they're able to benchmark outside of their own industry and get exposure to the same types of problems, but in very, very different contexts with people who are at their level.
Right. Okay, so I think we've kind of managed to kind of diversify the EMBA from the ABA degree. But now I really wanted to kind of go into the whole idea of executive MBA education in Europe in particular. So I'm going to group the next two questions into one, and I would like to ask you to talk a bit about why study an EMBA in Europe? What is the difference between a European and an American EMBA program? For instance, we all know that MBA programs in the States last for 2 years, whereas in Europe they're mostly 1 year. So this is one big difference. But what other differences are there when we talk about executive education in Europe and executive education in the US? Let's start with Valerie.
I think, well, at first the main struggling difference, of course, will be the continent. We are in Europe, and especially at ESCP Europe. Of course, we are dealing with our continent, our European culture, our European business environment mainly, and I think also the teaching methods may be different from the ones used in the US. When in fact at ESCP Europe, I must say that we don't have one teaching method because as we have 5 campuses across Europe, the teaching methods used in our campuses may differ from one another. So clearly, if you look at the name of our school, ESCP Europe, we are mainly focused on Europe as we have 5 European campuses. And we deal more with the European business environment, but of course we are open to the international world, to the worldwide economy. So, and we are offering a curriculum within Europe, but also open to other countries outside Europe.
Sophie?
Yeah, so for us, it's a little bit different because we are basically a partnership, an American-European partnership. So we are partnered, WHO is partnered with Kellogg in the US. So we really do provide a good balance between American business practices and business know-how and European business know-how. And actually, being part of an executive MBA global network headed by Kellogg, we are actually a very global program. But then again, we do have our faculty it's about half-half. We have our faculty members are coming, half of them are coming from Kellogg in the US, and they're actually flying in to teach our executive MBA students on campus here in Germany. And then we have the other half who's coming from either WHO or other very prestigious European institutions. And so really our idea with this global network that we have, and it really transpires into our curriculum and our program, is that we really want to emphasize on providing some local knowledge but with a global perspective. So we do have global electives, and I think also one of the advantages, I would give an example. We have a student right now who's actually based in Miami, and she's working for a big corporation in Miami, and she's actually, it was her goal to fly in to Germany to really continue her to do her executive MBA in Europe, because she had the intention of transferring from the US market to the European market. So she really needed to understand the European market, and so so that's what we are able to provide. We are able to provide a very good balance, a very good mix of American and European know-how.
Right. So how about KEDGE first?
KEDGE positions itself as a global executive MBA, most definitely. But in all sincerity, the vast majority of resources that we put into place are very European in perspective. In terms of faculty, about 48% of our faculty is European. I think that's very important to say right from the beginning. I think American MBA programs respond to the American market, and they do a very good job of that. Whereas from our perspective, not just a purely European perspective, but we are trying to look at on a much more global level. We have two principal campuses, one in Shanghai and one in Europe. So we position ourselves between Asia and Shanghai, but the vast majority of our executive MBAs are located in Shanghai, as a matter of fact. But I agree very much with Sophie that an executive MBA today has to be in a global context. That Europe is very important, and we draw very heavily our executives from the European countries. But most definitely, we're very global in perspective. I think that 159 out of the top 500 Fortune 500 companies are located within Europe. So it makes it the second largest economic bloc in the world. And that's very, very consequential. And I think people seeking executive MBAs are fully aware of that. So having European-based MBAs that are multilingual, extremely open to diversity, with very, very broad perspectives and networks, are immediately differentiated from American programs.
Right. So from what I gather from you is, from all of you, is that, if I may put it that way, it's 50% European, 50% global, and then overarchingly, and then with an overarching idea of, teaching global concepts and global business.
It's global concept and global business, that's for sure, because everybody is looking worldwide on the worldwide economy, but still, it's very important also to develop local concepts and who are meant for, I would say, local European concepts meant for European business environment. The local network is also very important.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, for example, our executive MBA is trying to offer to our participants is local concepts, European concepts, local network, and also, of course, global network through the partnerships and the international seminars we are offering. So it's also local and global.
Right. So Kurt briefly touched upon the idea of, campuses being, in Asia and in Europe. I know that Kellogg, has a global network. ESCP has all kinds of partnerships. So I'm really interested to hear how diverse and international are EMBA classes in Europe and at your institutions? Kurt?
Okay, well, I would say extremely rich. First of all, the faculty that we bring in come from all over the world. They often work with other business schools as well. They come from the corporate sector. They work in consultancy positions, etc., for major companies all over the world. As I said, KEDGE has a very, very strong link between in Asia, between China and France in particular. Highly diverse in that sense. The makeup of my executive MBA program is 79% international, meaning non-French. So I'm drawing people from virtually every European country, as well as I have 4 or 5 participants from Africa. So you have an enormous international diversity within the classroom. Your faculty is very international. We've been doing this for many years. As a consequence, we have a very, very internationalized alumni base, a network there. From a corporate point of view, absolutely, we're constantly working with companies in various locations all over the world. So I have to say, it's extremely internationalized. Though home base is at one of our 4 campuses, or one of our 3 campuses within Europe, there's extremely, it's very, very international program.
Mm-hmm. Sophie?
Yeah, it's the same for us. For instance, we just started the new intake this year, and we have about 76% of international participants. So coming from about 22 countries. So it's very highly international. It's highly diverse. We do have inclusion increasingly, we're trying to attract more and more women also to the program. It's very important to talk about that kind of diversity too. And then also we do bring a lot of different industries. Increasingly, I would say for the past few years, which we're very happy about, we've seen a lot of lawyers, a lot of entrepreneurs joining the program, really diversifying the portfolio of industries that we attract. So it's a highly global program, and also, you know, being one of the executive MBA partners among the other partners, the global partners that we have, like KEDGE in Hong Kong, and Schulish School of Business in Toronto. So it really adds to this internationality, because our students and participants have the opportunity to take global electives where they go and study and meet with the other international cohorts. So it's highly global and international.
Valerie?
Well, our class profile is also very international. We have more than 25 nationalities among the group, coming from the 5 continents, so America, Europe, Africa, Middle East, Asia. So it's highly diverse in terms of nationalities. It's diverse in terms of gender. We are trying to also, like Sophie said, we are trying to attract more women. So classes, we have classes with 30% female representatives, which we are very happy about. Of course, we are trying to attract women, and that's why we are offering also a special scholarship for women. It's also the class profile is very diverse in terms of sectors of industry, as we have people coming from IT, telecommunication, retail, banking, consulting, tourism, manufacturing. It's highly diverse, and all this diversity is very important for what all the participants in general will learn from one another, of course.
Right. So I kind of get the idea that, you know, all of these concepts that you brought into this discussion in terms of the global profile, in terms of the rich backgrounds of your, you know, professionals, in terms of the rich managerial experience, and then also on top of that, the different backgrounds, both professional, gender, nationality, etc. This all kind of, you know, makes me think that it's all really a big mix in this classroom, and then all of these little factors of diversity really enrich, you know, any EMBA program, really.
Well, the reality is that Europe is very, very diverse by nature. And multiple language and tons of groups that have to be considered anyway. So it seems logical that an executive MBA program based in Europe is very, very diverse in what we do. So we're extending that throughout the world, and that's the natural evolution, I think, of the executive MBA today.
So Kurt, let me just take what you just said and kind of ask you the next question straight ahead. So having said that, how is studying an EMBA program in Europe beneficial to one's global career?
You'd like me to begin?
Yes, please.
Okay. Well, I think that it depends very much on the individual and what their professional objectives are. But my experience with executive MBAs is that they are all very much global in scope. They're required every day to consider distribution channels within Asia, to look at logistical frameworks, the legal ramifications of Europe. They have to look at production factors locally, resources that may be sourced in an emerging market. That's the absolute reality of business today. And the higher you get within any organization, those realities become important. So an executive MBA program that focuses on the ability to look across all of those different areas is extremely not only beneficial but necessary. I mean, I think many of the people doing the executive MBA are here because they know they must do this. It's just simply an imperative. And I mean, I think that's a very strong factor with the people that I work with.
Right. So I kind of get this feeling of this idea of, you know, globalization equals localization. So, but in that sense, Valerie, can I ask you the question in a slightly different manner? What do you think is the skill set that a European executive MBA program gives to your graduates that, you know, an executive MBA program located elsewhere does not give? So what is the European added value, in your opinion, to, you know, to a global vision, to, you know, to a global career?
Okay, I will talk more precisely about what we are offering at ESCP Europe in our executive MBA.
Okay.
We are offering courses in our 5 different European campuses owned by ESCP Europe in Paris, London, Madrid, Turin, and Berlin. We are offering courses, we are offering fundamentals of management, electives. We are offering a very modular curriculum so that anybody can customize his own curriculum. I think what we are offering to our participants is an openness to the local European business environment, and as they have to spend also time in international seminars in America, Asia, and another country in Europe, in Brussels, it gives them a global idea of all the worldwide issues today. So this is what we are offering to our participants. So it's not only local, but we have to deal with worldwide issues.
Right. Sophie?
Yeah, sure. I think one of the benefits is that, I mean, at least in our program, and I think it's the case, I think Valerie mentioned that too earlier, but is also the network. I think the European network, by the fact that we are a partnership between an American school and a European business school, of course, both have very extensive network with WHO focusing on, of course, the European region, and the school, WHO has a very vast, extensive alumni network. So I think those networks are really important, and they really open the door to some great professional opportunities, whether it is within Europe or globally. So I think those networks are also really important.
Okay, so
I'd like to add to that just really quickly.
Sure,
You asked about skill sets and what specifically would someone get in Europe rather than in the United States. And I think the key thing that I come across regularly is, first of all, there's much more linguistic and cultural sensitivity that's required when you're working within a European global executive MBA. You need to learn to manage values in international teams, which is not easy if you don't have that diversity around you and you're not required to practice and build projects with a very, very diverse group. You have to master international business practices that come from anywhere in the world, where my own MBA experiences in the US tended to be very, very US based in a lot of those areas, or I should say US centric. When you come to things like negotiations and cultural considerations within negotiations and that kind of thing, if you have not done your executive MBA within a context and been required to expose yourself to those practices, then you're not prepared to go out in the world and to negotiate and to actually achieve within the world. So it's not just a business case, you have to be able to do it. And I think an important idea is that there's not only one way to do something, which is I think there's an openness to many different ways of doing things and finding concession and building on that. And I think those are skill sets that are constantly emphasize within our Global Executive MBA here at KEDGE.
Great. So, okay, then let's talk a bit about your graduates. Sophie just mentioned the alumni networks. So, can you give me some examples, even if you have statistics? I'm really interested to hear, what portion of your graduates end up returning to executive jobs with their previous or, a new employer, and what percentage of your cohorts embark on entrepreneurial ventures? Right now we're entering this huge startup craze. We're not really even entering it now. It's going on for years now. So I'm really interested to hear, are more students, graduated, participants of EMBA programs embarking on entrepreneurial ventures now compared to years before? Sophie?
Yeah, so I think, at least that's what we've seen so far. We've seen also a lot of candidates who have the intention of going back to their executive jobs after the EMBA, and they end up, like we recently had an example of three guys who actually met in Hong Kong at one of the global electives that we have. And one was from Kellogg, and they two were from Kellogg, and one was from the HKUST, and they decided to just start their own business, after they had met, and they built relationships throughout the program, and then they decided to just start their own business within 2 months of graduation. So we've seen a lot of those cases, and more people definitely have been asking about entrepreneurship courses, and also we have a lot of people who write their master thesis, which is required here in Germany, and they write a business plan, and some of them do follow up on those business plans, and they start their own company. So it's been really a big trend, I would say, at least the past couple of years. Yeah.
Valerie?
Two things I want to say about this question. First, I must say that I take part in many selection interviews, half of the interviews done in Paris. And when you meet candidates before they enter the program during the selection process, some of them have already a very good idea of what they want to do afterwards. We met the company, or they already have an entrepreneurial project, or they are seeking for a second professional life, so it depends on. What is very important to understand is that after 18 months in our executive MBA program, 18 months of traveling all around Europe and all over the world, being with their classmates who help them have new ideas, new projects, with the international consulting project they are working with in group, changes them a lot. What is very important to understand is that an executive MBA is really a transformational experience, and some of them, it means that people who had a certain idea, a definite idea at the beginning, probably will change all over the 18 months and move another one at the end. Also, because we are offering a very international course experience, as you know, in the last FT ranking of 2014, the ESCP Executive MBA was ranked second worldwide for the international course experience. So, of course, all this exposure to new ideas, new people, new business environments helps you change. And here, when we look at numbers, in general, also in the last Financial Times ranking, we were ranked second in career progression worldwide. So it means that really they add value for money, because the salary, the career progression they had 3 years after graduation was valid, because we were ranked second. If we look more deeply in the numbers, I would say that around 20 to 25 of our participants, graduates, remain in that company, But of course, they have a great promotion within their company with a higher position than before. For example, we had lately I've had example of someone who was sales VP before and now is general manager in his company. We also have some participants who had no idea of such an entrepreneurial project at the beginning, and at the end, because of the ICP, the International Consulting Project, they begin an entrepreneurial project with their classmates. I would say 5 to 10 of them at the end launch their own company.
Right. Okay. So I really like this idea that you kind of brought in about this, of having an idea prior to starting a course like this, and then either kind of realizing that idea upon graduation or, getting into a whole different field. It kind of reminds me what, one of the requirements for entering, a PhD course, for going for a PhD, you have to have, an idea of what your dissertation is going to look like, the topic of your dissertation. Of course, those are very different kinds of educations, but the idea, like the notion that you have to know what you're doing seems very prevalent in both degrees. Kurt, do you agree with this, explanation of things?
Not fully, no. I think that, first of all, within a full-time executive or a full-time MBA program, people stop working, they dedicate themselves, and they're looking for what I would say sometimes even radical change or a very substantial change. And that's why full-time MBA programs invest so heavily in their career services department and that kind of thing. Where at the executive level, people come in with ideas, firm ideas often. They do change their ideas most definitely, but certainly not flippantly. One of the things that we do at KEDGE, all of our executive MBAs are required to work with an executive coach. And the executive coach spends quite a few hours with them, helping them to fine-tune and to find things that are realistic and that are, over the long term, fine-tuning ideas that they do have from the beginning. And I think it's important that when someone does an executive MBA, that they have some clear ideas, maybe not set down in concrete, because they certainly will evolve over the entire course of the program. But I don't think it's a program that creates radical change. I think it's one that helps guide them to a very realistic development or evolution. I also fundamentally believe that an executive, I don't think I've ever met an executive MBA that had not thought at some point or another, I want to run my own business. Right. And I think that form of entrepreneurialism exists in all of my executive MBAs. Sometimes it manifests itself in the form of becoming a consultant within an industry where they learn to have confidence in themselves and they can fly free of an institutional setting. And I have a good 20% of my executive MBA that pursue that. They go into positions of consulting, and that is a form of entrepreneurial behavior. So I'm not sure that I think it's important that at the executive level that people have some good ideas coming in to do their executive MBA.
No, yeah, I absolutely think that, both Valerie and you kind of, touched upon this notion. And I can imagine, for a person with, 10 to 12 years of professional experience, it's logical that he or she will have really clear professional ideas and career progression ideas. But speaking about this, I want to ask you a question about, the different curricula which your institutions have. I already heard about the general management idea, and then, of course, there's things, subject matters that are very similar to what the classic MBA teaches. But let's put it in the European context, if we can. So Europe, the European economy has, traditionally over the centuries been fueled by small and medium enterprises. But, we also have the the London city, we have Frankfurt as huge financial hubs. So I'm really interested to hear, do you, in the curriculum, do you teach more things that have to do with, with managing medium and small enterprises, or do you teach, big capital management? Kurt?
The way we work at KEDGE in terms of the organization of the program, we offer 13 core modules, which are, I would say, relatively standard within the MBA industry. It's what we're accredited on, and we have to maintain the high quality on those for accreditations, etc. Beyond that, we offer 11 different specializations. 2 of the specializations that we offer do focus on entrepreneurship and innovation. And that does tend to link itself very closely to small to medium-sized organizations and even startups, absolutely. We often try to combine those with the international business seminars that we run that help people to look at emerging markets, we also travel to the west coast of the United States in California, where participants are able to see the startup cultures there, etc.
Sophie?
Yeah, I mean, for us, in terms of course, we are a general management executive MBA program, but and we don't offer official specializations. But what we do have is through our global network and our global electives, our students are able to focus really on one area that's really that could be a function, whether it is marketing or finance, or also an area of the world. So they can sort of specialize in a way which for some students is really important. For instance, we have the global elective that we offer in Miami at the Kellogg campus in Miami is very focused on finance, and a lot of the students who are looking to specialize into finance, they do go there and they select that global elective. In terms of the small and the medium enterprises, WHU is very strong. We have a chair which is very strong towards that, towards the small and medium enterprises. So we have a chair at WHU dedicated to that, and we have, of course, courses that focus on, small to medium enterprises, also family enterprises as well. So we do have the opportunity. We do offer the opportunity to our EMBAs to specialize on
Right.
topics.
To diversify their knowledge and
Exactly.
the practical skill set between financial markets and medium enterprises and small medium enterprises. Valerie, how is the curriculum at ESCP?
So clearly our executive MBA at ESCP Europe is clearly a general management program. We don't have any specialization, but our curriculum is very customizable, as any participant can choose for the 9 core courses we are offering, which are the fundamentals of management. They can choose the track they want to study. So it means that they can choose between studying those 9 core courses in Paris, or in Berlin, or in Torino, in Madrid, or through what we call an itinerant track, which allows any participant to follow those core courses, one in the row, first week in Paris, then in London, Berlin, Torino, and Madrid. So all across our 5 campuses. So this is the first choice they have to do, choose the place where they wish to study core courses. Then why is it also very customizable? Because each participant has to choose 9 elective courses among a portfolio of 35 electives offered at ESCP Europe, plus 9 electives more turned around political communication, and Political Science, offered at the 30 School of Governance, which is a strong partner of ESCP Europe. This school is in Berlin. So it's a very customizable program. Of course, we have lots of participants who come from big companies, but we are also very interested in small and medium enterprises and their issues. That's why we offer a scholarship specially meant for participants coming from small and medium enterprises.
That's very interesting.
Just a word again about the portfolio of electives. Each participant customizes his own curriculum, choosing the electives he wishes to follow, and each year, so these electives are either specialized management issues or electives on personal development. And each year, the portfolio of electives is revised, and we take into account what the companies of our advisory board says about the new tendencies about the business environment, the new subjects that are very important for them, and we are revising this portfolio every year.
Right. It sounds like you really know what you're doing, so to speak.
We know what we're doing.
I want to ask you the next question, if you could answer me really quickly, because my last question I think will be really interesting for our, for our audience. If you can tell me really quickly, so how big are your alumni networks currently?
At the EMBA level, KEDGE is the third largest business school in France after the merger between the Bordeaux École de Management and EMBA. At the EMBA level, we have about 1,800 network alumni worldwide.
18?
1,800.
1,800. Okay, Valerie, how many people do you have in your networks?
In our EMBA network only, because ESCP Europe is a very old lady, as we are the first business school in Europe, created in 1890. So at the level of ESCP Europe, any of our executive MBA participants or graduates can look for a network of 45,000 graduates all over the world. And more specifically, the size of the MBA community is of 4,000 graduates.
Okay, Sophie?
Yeah, so for us, being a partnership between two schools, the advantage of this is that participants who join our program, they automatically are granted access to both alumni network, and this represents about 60,000 alumni worldwide.
So do you guys have any statistics about your EMBA alumni networks, or you don't really differentiate between, between those networks?
You mean between the whole school and the MBA network? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I'm really interested to hear. So because everybody thinks of networking when they hear MBA, and then of course EMBA. So I'm really interested to hear, what kind of networking can you say that you have when it comes to EMBA students, EMBA graduates in particular?
The statistic that I gave, the 1,800, that's purely MBA. Obviously, KEDGE Business School has 35,000 alumni, and we do make a difference and try to develop the MBA alumni in particular.
Okay, so those are really impressive numbers. But for my last question, I really wanted to touch upon a very delicate topic. Europe is very sensitive about gender equality. Many countries have a quota for women in executive positions. I know that Germany has it, there's France, Spain, those are all countries that really emphasize that. And not too long ago, the debate about women in business even made its way to the European Parliament, if you remember that. So Sophie mentioned it earlier that they try to pay special attention to women in executive education. So my last question to you is, how well does your program accommodate the business ladies of tomorrow?
Yeah, so just to continue on what I was talking about, I think some of the tactics that, or some of the tactics that we have to attract more females to the program. We also, just like Valerie mentioned about the ESCP, we also have scholarships really directed at women. So try to facilitate this aspect of very often women, when you talk to them, the financial aspect is a hurdle and is a challenge for women to join the executive MBA. Of course, it's not the only challenge, but in terms of already that, we do provide at least 2 scholarships every year. We try to for women, so we do a lot of work with that. And in terms of also in terms of the schedule, again, I think it's really important. Another challenging part is for women to really balance, their family lives and their work lives. So I think the flexible schedule and the modular schedule allows them to really have time for family as well, and that gives them some flexibility. We also have, like Kurt said about his program, is that we also do offer business coaching sessions where our EMBA participants can talk about topics, such as the work-life balance in the EMBA, and that is one of the preferred topics for our females. Really need some support for that. So that's what we do.
It sounds quite accommodating indeed. So Valerie, how about ESCP?
Well, at ESCP, we always try to attract more women. Of course, we are not talking about quotas, but we would like to have every year 30% of women among our participants. Well, as you know, there's nothing new in what I will say. The glass ceiling is existing for women managers in Europe and everywhere in the world. So it's rather difficult to do more and better in executive MBAs than in the professional world. However, we are trying still to attract women through a scholarship meant for women, especially. We are, among the electives, we have 2 electives focused on women matters. And of course, we invite, in these electives, and we have not only female participants, but male participants, because we need to have male participants be aware of what women will bring to them in their companies, what all the women, their way of seeing things, issues of treating, taking care of issues and problems and conflicts is very different from men, and we bring an added value to their companies. So this is very important. That's why we are always having information session focused on women. And a few years ago, among our graduates, we have a very famous graduate from the ESCP work called Lindsay Nefesh-Clark, who was awarded the best MBA student by EMBA a few years ago. And this lady built a website specially meant for women in poor countries, in emerging countries, to help them. So we are very focused on women, and we would like to have much more than this.
This Definitely something to be proud about. Kurt, what about KEDGE?
Well, I think, KEDGE can boast a little more than 30% women on our executive MBA program. Obviously, we have a scholarship designed to help women as well. I think quotas are an absolutely ridiculous thing with respect to men or women. I recently polled my women executives here and asked them about that very question. And I was surprised by the response. The response for them was that they were here to build confidence and to be able to stand in the man's world and to actually perform better. And their reaction was the best thing that they could do to succeed in business was to do an executive MBA program. KEDGE, we have relatively intimate-sized executive intakes. We keep them relatively small, although we have them across our 4 campuses. And that gives women on our program a greater opportunity to rise above the crowd. They're not in large groups, mainly of men. They tend to be in smaller groups where they have a lot more voice and a lot more interaction, a lot more ability to practice and to not get steamrolled over, if you will. Although that certainly has not been the type of women I have engaged with here at KEDGE. But I think that the real key issue for women and why they do executive MBAs often is for this confidence within business. They have unbelievable skills and they're looking to build that power within themselves. And I agree with Sophie that the coaching element is very, very key, especially in the case of women, to help them to identify what their real leadership skills are. And we see in the media constantly that women have these unbelievable leadership skills, and they're being more and more sought after by major companies because they work. And so we're definitely very in tune to women and encourage. I mean, if I had a group of 80% women on my program, I think that would be sensational.
It's really interesting that all of you kind of rejected the idea of quotas, and it's really interesting that of course this is a whole different institution. It's not an entire country which has to cater to all kinds of different social and socio-economic needs. But it's really interesting that you rejected it on the principle that a strong woman who has ambitions to reach executive level does not need a quota in order to succeed. And I would really like to close it on this really nice notion. I would just like to ask you all if you have some closing words to add, because I think we had a really nice talk, but our time is running out. Sophie, do you have something to add?
No, I really enjoy participating in this, and I think that we are always welcoming questions, and so if candidates who are hearing us today, if they have any questions, then they shouldn't hesitate to contact us directly.
Great. Valerie?
I've been very happy to take part in that discussion. We are offering very often information session, and we'll have an online information session very soon on October 20th. And in any case, we'll be more than happy to answer any questions of managers who are seeking for development of their career and would like to know more about us.
Great. Kurt?
I thoroughly enjoyed this session, and thank you very much, and especially my colleagues. I've learned a lot about your programs and very, very informational. Just would like to say that KEDGE takes an individual, personalized approach to admissions. We like to speak with people. We invite them in to actually sit in on a day on our MBA to explore the program. So we welcome your questions and would absolutely love to get to know you more and see what we can do together.
That's great. Okay, so Sophie, Valerie, and Kurt, I thank you very much for your participation. For me, it was also a big pleasure to hear from you, a deep down dive into, what an EMBA is, what is the advantage of an EMBA in Europe. And thanks everybody for listening. From your host, Anton Zhelev, goodbye, and until the next Spotlight podcast. See you. Bye.